In this class, I want to talk about market supply, and I want to introduce this idea into our studies. Economics is about markets. It's about different facets of the market, how markets change, how they operate, and many aspects of the market. But the market is essentially an interplay between demand and supply. In this class, I want to just talk about supply and look at some of the features of supply. This is a very introductory class. It's a very foundational class. We're starting our work on the market, and this is one of the background videos that will underpin some of that work. So it's an important video, but it is at a very basic stage. We're right at the start here, and it will become more sophisticated, as you would expect, as we move through the course. So let's start market supply. The total market supply of a good is the amount that firms in the industry will supply to the market at various prices. Okay, that's what it is. It's the amounts that the firms in the industry will supply to the market at various prices. As the price change, they'll supply more or less, depending on how the price changes. So they keep an eye on the price in the market. As the price change, they will change the amount that they supply into the market. And this, we believe, happens with the vast majority of goods. We say it's the horizontal summation of the individual firm's supply curves. Now, I'll look at that in a second. It sounds horrible. A horizontal summation of the individual firm's supply curve. It's a little bit of economic slang. It's a nice term. I'll explain what it means in a moment. In the meantime, let's just get this out of the way and say demand is also a flow concept. In economics, we have two types of concept related to time. We have flow and stock. A flow concept is the amount that's supplied by the firms at various prices per unit of time. Per day, per week, per month, per year. Flow is related to time. Stock is not related to time. The stock is 100 units. There's no time element. We just say, what's the stock? The stock is 100 units or 1,000 units or whatever. There's no time. The flow is we receive 200 units a day, per unit of time. Flow is related to time. Stock is not related to time. Now let's go back and look at this horizontal summation, this term just above it. It is the horizontal summation of individual firms' supply curves. Okay, there's the supply curve for firm A. We know it's a supply curve because it's got two S's. But seriously, it's upward sloping. It's the price per unit. If I put the cursor on here, we have the quantity per unit of time. We have the price per unit. So we have the axis right. And here we have a price P1. And at the price P1, QA is supplied. That's the amount that the businesses put on the market at this price. So at this price, producers will put QA on the market, whatever QA is, 100 units a week or 1,000 units a week or whatever. They're going to put some number on here. So they'll put this amount QA on the market. Firm B, in the same time period, might put QB on the market. And I'll have a different supply curve. You can see it's a different gradient. It's in a different... So at the price P1, it'll put QB on the market. So we can see where that works. I jumped a bit forward. Let's add the two together. If we add the two together, we'll get the industry. We'll say this industry has just got two producers, A and B. Now, if we add at P1, we'll keep the price at P1 all the way across. That's the price all the way across. We've got QA from A, QB from B, and QA plus B from the sum of the two of them. So this would be the industry supply curve. If we say the industry is just two producers, A and B, if we add them horizontally, we'll get the market output. This is what they're producing between them. A produces QA, B produces QB. Together to produce QA plus QB. That's it. Now let's go to this one. In general, the firms in the industry exist to make a profit for their owners. That's why companies exist. They don't exist to amuse people, generally speaking. Some people love to have a business and like the freedom of the business, but they must make a profit. If they don't, they can't exist. They will run out of money, they will go bankrupt. So they need to make a profit. They need to cover their costs at the very minimum, but ideally they should have an incentive to open the business in the first place, to undertake the risk of running the business. They need to make a profit. Higher market prices are a powerful incentive to increase production. As higher market prices kick in, more will be produced. As the price increases, more and more marginal firms can enter the industry and commence production. A marginal firm is a producer who's not in the market, but who's thinking of joining, but hasn't got in because too worried about competition, too worried about the competitive state of the market, too worried, not going to join. It's a marginal firm. It's thinking of coming in. So these marginal firms will join. As the price rises, they see more and more incentive to join the market. So increasing the price, more marginal firms will join and more will be supplied in the marketplace. Now, the determinants of market supply, well, the quantity supplied will, per unit of time, it depends on. We use this term all the time. We talk in economics, we say something depends on something else. We're looking for dependency. And this time, the quantity supplied depends on, well, it depends on the price. That makes sense. The higher the price, the more that will be supplied. The price of related goods. If you think about the supply of cars onto the market, the demand for cars will also depend on the price of petrol or oil or electricity or whatever powers them. So the price will have related items. It depends on how much income have the consumers got to spend. What's the average incomes in the society? What's the competitor prices like? There are many factors, and we'll go through these when we talk about supply more fully in a later class. Clearly, income. If the purchasers don't have enough income, they're not going to buy it. So the amount supplied in the market will depend on consumer income. It'll also depend on the technology within the firm. Perhaps labour-saving technology has come out. Perhaps now companies are using AIs or using particular databases, or they're using some sort of electronic gadgetry, some sort of electronic things that make production easier. They've streamlined their production, they've updated their technology, and that would influence the amount supplied. Also, the goals of the firm. By goals, I mean the objectives of the firm. Some firms might be set up to maximize profit. The owner wants to get the maximum out of it. Some might just set up because they just want a way of life. They want to make enough money to survive. They don't want to be too competitive, work too hard. They just want to have a business that'll keep them going. They have the freedom of the business. And that's it. The goals of the firm will determine the amount supplied. The objectives of the firm will determine it. The amount of tax in the country will perhaps influence the supply. If the government increases corporation tax, less companies will open. Why should they open and pay a lot of tax? Just forget it. Why go through all the hassle of setting up a business if you're going to pay a lot of tax to the government? So the government, in its what's known as its fiscal policy, it has to make sure that during the budget it doesn't overtax industry. In fact, if it cuts the tax, it may actually get more from industry because more companies will be set up, more companies will pay tax. So the government might even be richer by cutting the tax. I know that sounds a little strange, but that is true. They cut the tax, and therefore companies work harder, they produce more, new companies will set up because it's low tax, and the government might receive more as a consequence. There are other influences on production and output which I'm not listing here. For example, if you're a farmer, the output of your farm might depend on the weather. Possible. There are all sorts of other influences. We always have this in economics. We say there are other things that we can't think of at the moment, but there are loads of other things. And we say, well, if that's the case, there they are. So we'll just say other things. And depending on which market you're looking at, you can imagine other things as well. So the supply curve is upward sloping. At the price P1, more is supplied than at the price P2. At P1, we have quantity Q2. As P1, we have quantity Q2. I moved it around. And at P2, we have quantity Q1. So we can see as the price rises, the quantity increases. Now, a movement along the curve versus a shift of the curve. A change in the price of the product will cause a movement along the supply curve. Here we have a movement along the curve caused by a change in price. So a change in the price of the product will cause a movement along the curve. A change in one of the determinants of supply, other than the price, will cause a shift of the supply curve. Now, a shift of the supply curve means that the curve is, let's say, moved from S to S1. What could cause that? Well, let's say we're talking about farming again. The supply curve is S, that's the amount supplied, but suddenly the weather improves. Now it's fantastic weather for farmers, so output increases because the weather is so good for these particular crops. Now the supply has increased. Or the supply curve could shift because workers are becoming more trained and better trained by education institutions, and there's better training programs, so the workers are more productive. So the supply has shifted again to S1. And that's how we get a shift of the curve. If we get a change in price, we move along the curve. And if some determinant of supply changes, it causes a shift of the curve. And that will be mentioned in other classes as well. That's all we're going to deal with here. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.